So on June 22nd, 2019, Animal Care Control received a call from Police Communications for assistance with police at 5301 Ballman Avenue in Baltimore, which is Brooklyn, for a woman, Mrs. Kelly Brown, whom was severely bitten by a Rottweiler at this address. County Police was asked for assistance from Animal Care Control. Officer Adams responded. Kelly Brown of 5239 Creamy Avenue was bitten by a Rottweiler at the 5301 Ballman Avenue address. Officer Adams with the owner, Stephen Brown, in reference to the bite that occurred on his property. The bite victim was transported to the hospital for treatment before he arrived. Mr. Brown stated that a woman named Kelly Brown stuck her hand and arm over the fence and got bit by his dog, a Rottweiler, black and tan, and 3 years old, named Diesel. Mr. Brown advised that the dog was a rescue from a shelter. Mr. Brown advised that the former owner of the dog turned it in for euthanasia due to his aggression. Mr. Brown explained that he saved the dog and was trying to work with this dog on the aggression. Officer Adams advised Mr. Brown of the public safety law and gave him a copy of and explained that the victim was transported to the hospital and Article 12, Title 4, Section 402 of the public safety law. His dog would have to be impounded and quarantined at the shelter. Officer Adams was told by the owner that he was not taking his dog. Officer Adams again explained to the owner on why his dog had to be taken into Animal Care and Control's custody. Mr. Brown advised no, so Officer Adams contacted field supervisor to advise that the owner is refusing to turn over his dog for quarantine and due to public safety. Field Supervisor John Canning and the Administrator Robert Catlett spoke with Mr. Brown and advised the public safety law. Mr. Brown still refused to turn his dog over. Mr. Brown was concerned that his dog will not react well in the cages and the dog may be put down. Mr. Brown stated to Officer Adams to get a warrant to get his dog. The case was under further investigation. So during the investigation, I, Officer Thomas, and the Administrator Robin Catlett spoke to the victim, Mrs. Kelly Brown, on June 4th, 2019, and Ms. Brown stated that she was in shock because she walked by these dogs for years. She explained that she had been there 10.5 months and that everybody pets them. She explained that they are real friendly. She explained that the owner of the dog told her neighbor that the dog that bit her bit him when he first got him. Ms. Brown explained that she went to pet the dogs. They were up on the fence. The one grabbed her one arm and took her. Then she took her other hand to bop the dog to get him to let go. And the dog grabbed her right arm. She advised that she got approximately 40 to 50 sutures to close her wounds. She advised that she always petted the dogs. She advised that she would not have petted the dogs if she knew that the one was a killer or had behavioral problems. She advised that the fence is approximately 3 feet high on the side that she was on. She explained that the front yard is bigger and has a picket fence. Ms. Brown stated that all 3 dogs had their chest above the rail of the fence. She did not reach over the fence. She stated that the dog that bit her did not growl or bark, otherwise she explained that she would not have petted him. Ms. Brown advised that it was like the dog was trying to pull her in. Ms. Brown advised that she would be sending photographs. Ms. Brown sent in photographs of her wounds and they were extensive. I then, Officer Thomas, contacted Mr. Stephen Brown, the owner of the dog, spoke to him about the incident. Mr. Brown advised that he did not see the incident, that he was inside. He explained that he heard the barking, went out and saw the woman sitting on the curb. He explained that she told him that she was bitten by one of his dogs. I asked Mr. Brown about how long he has had the dog. Mr. Brown advised that he has had the dog named Diesel for about a month. He adopted him in May of this year from Dundalk Animal Hospital. I asked about the aggressive behavior prior if he was told anything. Mr. Brown advised that he was advised that Diesel was animal aggressive and the owner surrendered to the vet. Mrs. Brown was interviewed 2 other times on June 25th, 2019 and on June 27, 2019, and each time Ms. Brown was consistent with her statement of what happened. I contacted the health department to request medical records on Mrs. Brown. I then contacted Dundalk Animal Hospital to inquire about information on Diesel, since he was adopted from there. I spoke to a Dawn Knight. She advised that Diesel came from a vet clinic, Little Angels Clinic, from vet Dr. Enoya. I contacted the vet, Dr. Enoya, and she inquired about the information on the dog. She advised that Diesel belongs to Mr. Atkins. He was moving to Arizona and could not take Diesel with him. She explained that Mr. Atkins had two dogs, and the other was Diesel's brother. He was taken to Barks in Baltimore City and put down. Dr. Enola did advise that she was his regular veterinarian and has been there since the dogs were 9 weeks old. I contacted Baltimore City Animal Control and spoke with a Sandy Kerrigan. I inquired about the dog Diesel and Mr. Atkins, and Ms. Kerrigan did come back and said that there was a report of a bite, and she did send that information to me. According to the report, it advised that a Christopher Bean of 2922 Glenmore Avenue in Baltimore City was bitten by a dog named Diesel, a Rottweiler owned by Kenneth Atkins. I contacted Mr. Atkins and asked about his dog Diesel. Mr. Atkins advised that he had the two dogs, Diesel and Devo. They were brothers, and they kept different colored collars on them, one brown collar for Devo and one black collar for Diesel. He advised that he did not see the bite occur. However, his dogs got out of a 6-foot privacy fence, or 6-foot fenced yard. Christopher, his neighbor, grabbed the one dog and the other dog bit him on both arms. I asked him if he knew what dog, for the report reflected that it was Diesel. He explained that his wife, in which is an EMT, went over after the dog was secured on the property and spoke to Mr. Bean. He pointed out to her what dog he was holding, and he pointed out Diesel, and the other dog, Devo, bit him. Mr. Atkins then advised that the dogs have gotten into fights with each other. So he turned Devo into Barks, in which he was euthanized. Diesel was placed on a home quarantine. I contacted Christopher Bean to ask about his bite back in February of 2018. He explained that he was not sure of which dog that bit him. I asked him about pointing out, and he even then advised that he was not truly sure which dog bit him. He advised that he went to the Good Samaritan Hospital for treatment, just punctures, no sutures. And it occurred when he saw the dogs out in the yard. He grabbed the one by the collar, and the other dog came up from behind and bit him. In speaking with him, asked if he would send in a statement. No statements were received. When speaking with Baltimore City Animal Control Sandy Kerrigan, Devo was sent for rabies testing, and Devo was placed on a quarantine due to of not knowing which dog bit Mr. Bean. After final review of the case and file and medical reports and statements, Animal Care and Control and Means to Protect the Public from further incidents did issue a dangerous order in accordance with Anne Arundel County Code 124403 for dangerous animals. Mr. Brown filed an appeal, and we're here today.
I'd like to ask, I was informed that we would have the police report. The hearing is scheduled on Friday for today, so we put in a request for the police report, but we have not received it. The officer who took the report, PFC Moore of Anne Arundel County, informed us that he read the report to us, and it said that Ms. Brown reached over the fence, which is what she told him immediately after the incident happened, which is how Mr. Brown knew what happened, because that's what she told the police. However, I don't see the report here. We tried to issue a subpoena, but because it was the weekend, he was not able to accept it because it's 0 business days in advance. Do we have that report, Officer Thomas? Thank you.
Yes. It's in between C and D, the police report is. It's after the photos.
Also, like to state the victim and I have the same last name. We're not related, so there could be some confusion there.
I'd like to point out the differences in Ms. Brown's initial statement, where she states in the police report that she was reaching over the yard to pet the fence, to pet 2 dogs, and then there was also an additional dog in the yard that she was not familiar with, which would be the dog who bit her. And also that we have never previously seen or met Ms. Brown.
Also, when I refused to turn my dog over, we had our attorney on the phone, and he advised me not to turn my dog over without a seizure warrant because Miss Brown was trespassing when she was bitten. It wasn't like a.
You need to speak up, please.
I'm sorry. I said when we told Animal Control that we were not going to turn our dog over, we had our lawyer on the phone, and he advised us to ask them to get a warrant to take the dog because the person who was bit was trespassing on our property at the time that they were bitten. He wasn't running at large. He was in a fenced-in yard. So we weren't just saying you're not taking my dog. It was by our legal counsel's advice not to turn our dog over.
And where is Diesel now?
He's quarantined at Dundalk Animal Hospital.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure the order of things, but we do have some questions for.
Just how long has he been at Dundalk?
He was there. We made an agreement with Robin Catlett to have him quarantined, and Corporal Tapp was present at the time. She agreed to allow him to be quarantined at Dundalk when they were unable to get their seizure warrant. she also agreed that when we turned them over for quarantine there, they weren't gonna just go there and seize our dog. Within hours of when I turned
I'm
them
gonna
over.
object, because it's not why we're here. We're not here for the quarantine at all.
Well,
We're
it's-
basically here for
Yeah, I was
just
just
the
wondering how
order.
long it's been since.
Since
how-
Monday, the 24th at 8 a.m.
Well, not permanently though, because he came back here. They took him from there and brought him back here, and then they brought him back to Dundalk.
That's correct.
So I felt like that was relevant. That's why I was.
You said you had questions?
Yeah, so basically what we want to talk about here today is just that we don't feel like all of the determining factors were looked at. So the main factors being demeanor, a lack of a prior history, and mitigating factors. He doesn't have a bite history. In the seizure warrant, it states that he did. However, you can see on the animal view report that Officer Thomas just provided from Barks that we received this morning that the dog with a bite history was his brother, and he was subsequently put down for it, not Diesel. In addition to that, the person was trespassing. Diesel was not familiar. She admitted to reaching over the fence and also told Stephen that she was intoxicated at the time.
I'm gonna object to that because it wasn't told to me.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney. That's what we're talking about here today. But we did have some questions just about determining his demeanor, and in the packets also we have some statements from the people who've been taking care of him for the last 45 days. He was.
Wait, you're not an attorney?
No, I'm his fiance.
You're his fiance, so you were, okay.
Yeah, our attorney wasn't able to be here
Okay.
since it was really short notice, sorry. Yeah, but I'll just be talking. So can I ask Officer Thomas some questions about the statements? Okay. Officer Thomas, who made the determination that Diesel was dangerous?
Based on what the agency did, based upon the information that we had a very substantial bite to a human, understanding that you were advising that of trespassing. I do have the trespassing law here to pass forward. And the fact that, the investigation that came through for Baltimore City, in all parties, everything has been read, is that there was no 100% determination through Mr. Bean, of which dog actually bit. Understanding they're saying there, but nobody witnessed the incident except for Mr. Christopher Bean. He was talked to several times. I did advise him to send in a statement. That was his choice not to. And he clearly could not say whether or not which dog bit him. So we were concerned about that. Baltimore City, based upon the General Health Code of the state of Maryland, that's why Diesel was placed under quarantine. That's why Devo, obviously because of the fact that he was surrendered, he's not an adoption candidate, so that's why he was euthanized and was submitted for rabies testing. So we did take an account of that the fact that there was a possibility of a bite history here with the dog, and the fact that, understanding that if this was, we also looked at the fact that how could we protect the public, understanding that you have a 3-foot high or 4-foot high fence. If this was a child or anybody else, understanding that this could have been a lot worse than what it is. Our job is to protect the public regardless. And the way the public safety law is written, we felt it was necessary because of the fact that this was a substantial bite to this young lady. Well, she's not a young lady, but substantial bite and possible bite history. We felt there was need to issue a dangerous order. She had multiple sutures on both arms.
Why isn't this a vicious order? I mean, those
We don't
photographs are the
feel-
most gruesome I've seen
This one's pretty
Months.
substantial too. We didn't feel it was necessary because again, like I said, we were looking at the one incident. We can definitely say yes, it happened. It was right there at the property. It happened. We know that actual bite occurred. I think that what we were concerned about is why we weren't going to go with the vicious orders. We didn't think the vicious order fit, even though that the law states that we could go with the vicious order. I think the concern here was the fact that in the Baltimore City incident, when Mr. Atkins had the dog in his care and custody, the dog was not in his care and custody at that point, and we knew that. I think the concern is that the dog got out of a yard. There was no confirmation of whether or not which one it really was. Even with my own investigation to Mr. Bean, we still had to protect the public. We felt it was necessary to put some kind of stipulation. I think that if there was a larger fence in place or there was some kind of stipulation, understanding this dog was brand new to him, I don't think that Mr. Brown was even told 100% about possibility of background of Diesel. And this happens all the time, and we discussed that in length as well. And we felt that the dangerous order was more appropriate.
Mostly because this happened on their property, and basically to protect the public, you feel like the distance between that fence and the sidewalk
Correct, and
could lead
usually.
to further incidents, is that kind of what you're?
And what we did is that because of the fact that, looking, because I pulled up all of the aerials and, looking at that, from sidewalk to fence, usually this is a 3-foot easement, in the county. 3-foot easements basically are county property, because usually you're gonna see fire hydrants, you're gonna see, telephone poles and stuff, because they give them that room to put that, those things in place. I think that what we were looking at is we wanted to be able to protect everyone here. I mean, it wasn't necessarily just looking at the victim situation and going strictly with that. We were looking at the fact that if this wasn't an adult, this is also an area that has a lot of kids. This is also an area that's near a school bus stop. So we wanted to be able to obviously protect the dog. He just got the dog. He's trying to make a difference with Diesel. And we wanted to be able to, how can we do that? Because there is a small fence here. If the dogs were jumping up on the fence and they were chest level with up on the fence, could this continue to keep occurring? Obviously, if the dogs are excited, and they're seeing people walking up and down, that's just people's nature. The trespassing law, I actually looked it up, and I have it, I can give you guys a copy and stuff like that, and I can basically read this, and I totally understand where everybody's coming from. I think that, our objective as an agency is to protect the public, and I want to protect every interest here. We feel it's necessary also for the dog to succeed. This is a dog that's not with his original owner. This is a dog that has been moved. And understand it's a vet setting. But how can we make a difference? So when I pulled up the trespassing law and understanding what it says, it basically says prohibited, and this is the 6402 under Title VI. A person may not enter or trespass on a property that is posted conspicuously against trespassers by signs placed where they are reasonably may be seen, or paint marks that confront the regulations of the Department of Natural Resources adopt. And I even actually asked the law office in reference to this, is that if she was told. If he physically came out before she literally reached forward, whether they're up on the fence, down on the fence, around the fence, outside the yard, on his porch, he physically told her, please do not touch my dogs. Now she's breaking that plane, if that makes any sense. So, understanding where these guys are coming from, I think that, our jobs is, this bite was pretty bad. He meant business. He substantially opened her completely wide up. And I think that if, this could have went really, really bad if this was somebody younger. And I think that that was what our concern was. And the fact that we did not say 100%ly understanding what Baltimore City was doing in their investigation, that was the whole purpose of me calling them directly. Okay? Even Mr. Atkins even said that the boys would fight. They're the same height, weight, age, in both intact males. So, didn't get a chance to actually physically get a statement from Christopher Bean. I asked him several times to send me one, but he was perfectly clear. I asked him several times, and he told me, he said, Officer Thomas, I am really not 100% sure really what dog bit me. And the concern is that even in the statements, if you read them, and even with my notes that I'm writing on the Baltimore City report, where Mr. Atkins is giving me, 2 colored collars. That's how they kept them apart. He's telling me that Devo had a brown collar on and Diesel had a black collar on. But then when they sent their statement to me, they changed up the colors. They actually said basically a blue collar was there. So that was concerned too, and I was looking at that as well. So we just didn't feel that a vicious would be warranted here. I think that, given the chance that Mr. Brownlee only had him for a month, and he wants to try to make a difference with this, understanding this is a pretty substantial bite, we feel it's necessary that some stipulations have to be in place, regardless.
Mr. Brown, what are you asking the commission to do?
Asking them to drop the dangerous order and not even, I don't feel the dangerous order is necessary. I know she provided definition of trespassing under 6-401 is for criminal trespassing. The Maryland's general common law definition of trespassing is entering the property of another without consent or legal authority. This is the definition used in civil trespass owners in Maryland. Also, I would like to state that the distance between the edge of the sidewalk closest to my fence and my fence is 5 feet 10 inches. I understand there's a 3 foot allowed. I would like you to take into consideration her statement, Kelly Brown's statement with animal control, and compare that to her initial statement with Anne Arundel County Police, and see the numerous inconsistencies. She goes from telling Anne Arundel County Police that she reached over my fence to pet my dogs, and she saw a third dog approach which she was unfamiliar with, and when she went to pet him, he bit her. And then she says to animal control that my dogs were up on the fence, that she was familiar with the dogs. I mean, she admitted to Officer Moore in the initial report that she was unfamiliar with the dog and that she was reaching over my fence. So she's changed her story numerous times to benefit there's several inconsistencies. So she's clearly lied either to the police or to animal control.
We'd also like to reiterate that we've never met her or seen her before this incident. We'd never given her permission to pet the dogs. In fact, we'd never given anyone permission to pet our dogs without us there. We'd never given her permission to come onto our private property. You know, we didn't expect to have to do this. We thought it would be, you know, common sense, honestly, not to reach over someone's fence and attempt to pet their dogs when the owners were not there. However, you know, after this, we immediately ordered signs that said dogs in yards, no trespassing, and we have multiple of them to hang all along our fence line. And, you know, in preparation, because the dangerous order that was given that we're appealing, we also got notice from, you know, we rent from our landlord to say that it was okay to have diesel on our property. And the fence is about 4 feet high, yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
Based on what happened, regardless, I mean, I'm not sitting there saying this person obviously reached over your fence, whatever it was. This doesn't concern you at all, that you guys aren't around for a second, a kid comes by and doesn't look at the sign, doesn't care, can't read the signs, and this happens again. You don't see, I mean, I understand you don't want an order to have to follow the dog, but do you understand, I mean, even though it's 5 feet, 3 feet, whatever we're talking about, it's a potential problem.
Of course, we never thought that it would be a problem until this happened, and of course, if it was a child, it would be much more serious than with Miss Brown. Not that it's not serious enough with her bite, and we're taking measures to prevent that from happening, but we don't feel that because she was trespassing on our property and had no permission to be there, that he's a public safety threat. He's never been out of my property without being on a 6 foot non-retractable leash with a prong choke collar on. I've actually come in contact with several Anne Arundel County Police while I walked Diesel and one of my other dogs, you know, one in each hand. When I stop, they both sit next to me. They're not aggressive toward other animals when they're on their leash in public. They're not aggressive toward people, you know, or even officers. Officer Garcia, when I was speaking with Corporal Tapp, when Animal Control came out the last time to try and issue their seizure warrant, another officer pulled up, Officer Garcia, and he stated, referred to me as the Rottweiler guy, and that he'd seen my dogs when I was walking both of them on a leash, and how well behaved they were when I stopped. They both sit, you don't have to tell them anything. And when I walk, neither of them pull, they walk right next to me. So we never thought that, you know, it was an issue to public safety, because he's never attempted to leave the property, and he's never been out of my property without being on, you know, proper restraint.
And moving forward, you know, since that incident, we have always been outside with him. We have several tenants who also get along really well with all the dogs, so everyone's been pitching in to make sure that they're never outside alone, just to, you know, make sure that everything's fine, nobody approaches the fence. But, you know, we've lived here for over a year. It's never been a problem. We've had multiple dogs. I've never seen anyone else pet the dogs without my permission, to the best of my knowledge, and I've never invited anyone to do that without us being there.
Why weren't these dogs neutered?
Diesel is neutered.
He's neutered.
He is neutered. I said he was neutered.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
I think that, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I just think that, you know, the concern here of looking, you know, in on this is that the fact that he's only had the dog since May. And I understand dogs act differently when they're off their property with their dog owner. You know, he was different here. He was quiet. You know, I'm not going to judge him even if he was in here and he was being aggressive. I just think that basically being in a yard and understanding, I mean, I understand their point, and as far as, you know, the trespassing thing, but I think that what the concern here is that you can't be with your dog 24/7, you know, and we still have to remain responsible regardless.
We can be when he's or outside in the yard. We can absolutely be present with him, and it's not typical of us to allow the dogs in the yard without supervision, but they had done so well, you know, in the past that when I let them out that morning, I went back in to put my breakfast in the oven, and they weren't outside for less than a minute when I heard barking, and went outside and found Miss Brown.
Right, and then, and in turn, I do understand that as well, but in turn, we now know what the capabilities of this dog is. Was he being protective of the other two? The other two Rotties are really nice and younger. They're a lot younger than Diesel.
Right, it also came into question, was Miss Kelly Brown attempting to take our puppy, the youngest puppy?
I'm gonna
by having
object to
both
that
arms?
because we don't, she's
I
not
mean,
here
both
to
arms are over
testify
the
to
fence.
that.
Right.
Her testimony, I mean, she's lied numerous
I
times.
just don't, I mean, I can't, you're skepticating now. And this point, I mean, the whole picture here is, how can this be corrected? Period.
It can be corrected by us supervising our dogs when they're out in the yard and not leaving them unsupervised, and making sure that if anybody's outside near our dogs, we're out there to let them know and to keep our dogs away from them.
And we'd be happy to
Also
communicate with the
post-
neighbors that they're not welcome to come pet our dogs without permission. You know, we didn't think that would have to be stated explicitly, but we're more than happy to do that. We've communicated with several of them since then, and, you know, they've talked about how the dogs are very well behaved, but they've never pet them without us there because they're not their dogs.
But you do have signs posted now?
Yeah, we just got them. Yeah, right after this, we got them immediately.
And keep in mind, it's not necessarily going to stop a child because children don't read signs.
That's fine, but by being outside with our dogs, we'll be present. I mean, there won't be an issue because our dogs won't be outside unsupervised.
Yeah, I'd also like to
Happen.
state that due to the hours that we work, the dogs are never outside during times when school buses or kids are, we work in the evening, so they go out in the afternoon when people are in school and then out later at night. So there's, unless kids are out at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, there's no chance that they would be out there when kids are even outside. We have a schedule pretty much set down with that.
And I'm sorry, I stepped away for a little bit.
Yeah.
How many do you have now?
3.
3, you still
Oh,
have
no,
3?
sorry, still, Diesel's in quarantine, so it was 3 including Diesel. We just rescued him about, I guess it's about a month and a half ago now, and then we have 2 younger ones. Sasha we've had for over a year, and Winston we've had since before Christmas.
Just currently,
Just two.
just 2.
And how high is the fence?
4 feet approximately.
And
I'm sorry.
the dogs come to the top of the fence?
They're capable, but that's not what Miss Brown
Have to
stated.
reach over,
Yeah, she reached over.
would have to reach over the head.
She stated that in her police report, the initial statement, that she had reached over the fence to pet the other 2 dogs, saw an unfamiliar dog approaching, and went to pet him. She also, I believe, stated that he was barking when she attempted to pet him and was bitten.
And you said you got signs up.
Yes, we've recently ordered signs and we have them on our property now.
Have you had any training or assessments of Diesel?
With Diesel, no, I have not taken him for any training, but in walking him, I'm familiar with obedience training and knowing that by him staying by my side when I walk him and when I stop, he sits without command, tells me that he has had some form of training. Even if it's
Does he
basic
have a
obedience.
recall, an off-lead recall? So if you're in the yard and somebody's coming to your fence, can you call him to you
Yes.
reliably?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
But that's also in her yard.
Right.
Does he do it out?
Well,
He's never outside our yard without being on a 6-foot non-retractable
Have you ever
leash
trained him
with a drug
with
collar.
another handler?
I have a tenant downstairs in my house who agreed to help. He actually doesn't pay rent. His sole purpose is to assist with working with Diesel and working with my other dogs. He's the one that helped me deal with. They said that Diesel had initial dog aggression, and they were hesitant to allow me to take Diesel because I had 2 other dogs. And within 5 days of having Diesel, he was perfectly fine around my other 2 dogs, and that was a result of Nick Hedges working directly with me, walking one dog while I walked Diesel, and then walking my other dog while we walked Diesel. And now they play in the house together, they lay on the couch together, they're perfectly fine with each other. So I have had assistants working with them.
Anything else?
Yes, can we give you, you have a copy of the statement from Dawn?
Yeah, so
Dawn
there's
Knight?
a statement in there from Dawn Schaefer. She runs the Dundalk Animal Hospital.
Oh, yeah.
We'd like to call some special attention to that. It really calls in her Diesel's demeanor. He stayed at Dundalk Animal Clinic 45 days before he was rehomed to us. So they were with him for that period of time between the transition between owners, and that's where he's currently quarantined. And then there's another statement from someone who worked at Dundalk Animal Clinic. that we'd like to call attention to.
I would also like to state that in the dangerous order, it says that, our dog bit someone without being provoked. And I would like to state that Ms. Kelly's own admission in the initial police report was that she trespassed onto our property by reaching over our fence. She would obviously pass the 3 foot, whatever is allowable from the sidewalk, and further into that to reach over the yard to pet my other dogs. She was barked at by an unfamiliar dog and then bitten by an unfamiliar dog, so I believe he was provoked in biting her. I believe it, what happened to Miss Brown is, we're not proud of it. It's not our intent to have dogs that are vicious or dangerous to the public.
And we don't believe that we do.
And we're currently taking measures to prevent this from happening again. And like I said, we're not gonna have the dogs outside without supervision immediately. And that's to protect the public from themselves, because their failure, Ms. Brown's failure in judgment, I believe, is a contributing factor to what happened to them.
I have a question, and maybe, I'm not sure if everyone else is understands, but Diesel is the one that we're talking about, and we're certain that Diesel did the damage that is in those photos. And Devo explained to me we have these 3 dogs, there's 2 other dogs at home. Devo was also, it was Devo from a previous
We've never had
incident?
Devo.
Devo is Diesel's brother.
Right,
Okay, and
Okay.
that incident happened in Baltimore City back in
Right.
2018 of February.
okay,
They're litter mates.
right.
Yes, they are litter mates.
They were with the former owner, Mr. Atkins.
Mhm, Atkins.
or
Okay.
something, And.
So that's
it
part of
happened
that
at
history.
that residence or that community or, yeah.
Okay.
and-
There's a letter from the previous owners regarding the demeanor of the dogs and the previous incident in the files, both Officer Thomas's and ours that we presented.
Okay.
Also,
And it was Mr. Atkins that relinquished ownership of
Correct.
Devo and had Devo put down. Okay. And then, I think that helps clarify for me, just to kind of understand that connection. I didn't really get
Also,
that.
with all of my dogs, including Diesel, when I first bring them home, we walk the perimeter. My property is approximately a half acre, if not more. We walk the perimeter on a lead to get them familiar with their yard, so they're aware of their territory, basically. I mean,
And the dogs have never escaped their enclosure. It's a very secure metal chain link fence. None of the dogs have ever gotten out of there. They've always been maintained in the yard, and we're with them. They go out to play outside and use the bathroom, and they spend a lot of time in the house with us. They all get along really well. They aren't aggressive to each other. When people walk by on the public sidewalk, they just walk by. Like, they don't bark. They're not aggressive or anything. They don't really react because people are just on the public sidewalk because, it's 6 feet away. And they don't show any signs of aggression. Steve can attest to that as well. It was only when someone was reaching over the fence.
Understand?
we believe he was provoked, and that's why.
But apparently you weren't with them that day.
Right, for a matter of less than 1 minute, they were outside by themselves. And she approached the fence, reached over the fence admittedly, and provoked my dog.
How
At
large
any-
is the enclosure?
I'm sorry.
How large is the enclosure, your yard?
Our yard is the back lot is a half acre. I believe the front lot is also a half acre, so.
And they have access to all of that fenced in at one
They're on a
time?
corner lot.
Yes, they do.
So when, the supervision, so if someone was outside, how would they, supervision is only as good as the person who is supervising, or the persons who are supervising,
Right, by telling the
so-
person first, please don't come near my fence, please don't approach my dogs, and by calling my dogs back to me, which all 3 of them will come to me when I say come here, all 3 of them respond at the same time. I don't have to specifically call them out by name.
Since you said that you're familiar with obedience and dogs, then you know how quickly things can happen.
Yes, of course.
And the height of the fence, should be a concern for both of you.
I understand, but based on the facts of what happened that presented this situation, Kelly Brown being an adult and making the decision to trespass onto our property and reach over the fence, I don't think that constitutes an unprovoked bite or an unjustified bite. I mean, she was admittedly over the fence touching the other 2 dogs, one of which is a 7-month-old puppy, and then was approached by a dog she's unfamiliar with that's barking at her and still chose to reach out to that dog and try and pet him, and then was bit. and then her statement completely changes to Anne Arundel County.
No, I
Animal
heard
Control.
all of that. I'm trying to understand the prevention in the future because
Okay.
it's very significant. And like Officer Thomas said, I mean, now you understand the capability of what Diesel can do. He's willing to do. He doesn't have good bite inhibition. He does have the ability and capability to, an intent to be able to do this.
Right, when
And
provoked.
so it's important for you to understand that because that's
Absolutely.
very significant. And so I'm trying to see if you understand those things.
Of course, I
Because
understand
this
that he's
is, I mean,
capable of biting someone badly.
Quite
when
significantly,
provoked.
right.
Right.
And you know what, I understand with this provoke thing, I can sit here and listen to this all day with this provoke thing. You know, my concern is that, you know, you only had the dog since May, so it's a short period of time. You know, and it's still unclear about Baltimore City. I understand all those statements. I cannot say, as an investigator and doing this as long as I have, how statements change, because even the Atkins statements changed. So, you know, my concern here is that he's a 136-pound Rottweiler, okay? And, you know, I've seen the wounds and I've seen worse than what she got. And, you know, this agency is really concerned of his capabilities. Now, granted, if he got the training he did, if there were stipulations put in place, regardless of what we decide to do today as far as stipulations, this can stop something happening in the future. Maybe he may be a dog that does well and he gets the right training and, you know, underneath his belt and everything. But he acted alone. You guys were not outside, and I understand what you're hearing about the police report and what's being said and the provoke and all. But technically, if she was just sitting there, we'll just say hypothetically here, and she was just petting the other two, and he decided to intervene because he's being protective, he didn't just grab a hold of her and let go. No, he grabbed a hold of her, and he ripped into her. And he not ripped into her once, he ripped into her 3 times. She's got 3 wounds. They are substantial. They opened her up. If this was a child, that kid could have laid there and bled to death. You know, so I think that's what the concern is that it's not saying that, you know, we're not looking at the situation of a possibility of provoked here. You know, we're looking at the fact that if understanding what Ms. Brown said at the beginning and what she's saying now, because she's staying consistent with her stories. You know, I think that basically, you know, the concern is that this could be anybody walking down through there. Okay, the dogs seem friendly, they're wagging their tail. Maybe Diesel, you know, doesn't necessarily, you know, show friendliness right off the get-go.
My concern is not with what ifs or what could happen. My concern is with what happened and who it happened to.
So let me intervene here. What happened, we don't always have control over every detail. And there's often, you know, the stories tend to have like, there's fault on both sides kind of thing. And so regardless of what led up to what happened, what I am really struggling with to understand here is that, you know, please understand that this bite wound was a level 5 bite wound.
Oh,
okay?
absolutely. It was, you know, undoubtedly.
It was a
bad.
level 5 bite wound. It was not, there's levels here. They can bite without puncturing skin. Level 1, bite release, it's a snap, a warning. They can bite and bite down and puncture. They can bite down and shake. And they can bite down and shake and continue. So I want you to understand, this is a level 5 bite.
I understand that.
Because of that, I really am not interested in how it happened, what led up to it, fault here, there. It is significant enough to the
I'm
point.
sorry, we kind of need you to take that into consideration. because
Let me
that's-
finish.
No, we need public safety. Public safety is what we need to take into consideration here.
That
Public
level of
safety.
bite
Regardless
is
of
so
of
significant that it.
Public safety is what it comes down to. This is all about public safety.
I understand
If we
that.
feel like someone, regardless whether they're trespassing on your property or not, reaches across and gets bitten by a dog that can do that much damage, we need to try to protect the public
I understand.
from that happening. Whether you're on the porch and you call them back, whether you yell to the person and say, "Don't reach over my fence,"
And what
the
we don't
situation
have
can
control
exist.
over is kids or something like that on the sidewalk.
I understand that.
And as an
People that-
adult, you guys can have a civil case of whatever it is that you want to do outside of that.
Absolutely.
For here, what we're talking about is the dog. However it happened and the details, what I need to think about is a 4-foot fence with a dog that can and has done this damage. Whatever led up to it, I personally, and we'll, vote on this, but because of the severity of the wound, it wasn't a bite release, it wasn't a puncture, it was a level 5 bite, that I feel that the fence is so concerning to me, and the only way that we can enforce a 6-foot fence of protection for the public safety would be to uphold a dangerous order. And this could very well be a vicious order, and you're very lucky that it is not.
Okay,
We have no recourse but we have no way to check up, to have any, foothold to make sure that this dog is behind a 6-foot fence, other than a dangerous order. So I know you don't want this dog labeled. However, without a 6-foot fence, I am not comfortable. Like, the only way that we can ensure that there is a fence, and prevent this from happening again, is to have this order in place.
Okay, so if we can, if we sign an agreement agreeing to raise our fence to 6 feet.
This is the agreement.
No, we can do that without our dog being labeled a dangerous order.
We have no recourse to check up on and enforce it without this being upheld.
you're
So
gonna label
that's,
our-
I mean, that's what I wanted to explain of why it's so important to me. But I don't know how everyone else feels, but I'm just trying to explain to you why that is so important to me, is having better control from there. But anyway, that's just
I don't think
one
anyone's
thing.
discounting the fact that you have your property and that people shouldn't be reaching
Right.
over to touch your dog. I don't think anybody in this panel is saying that. But what we are all concerned with is that one person, that one time where you turn your head, turn your back, and the kid just happens to run over because a ball went in your
I
yard or
understand,
something.
absolutely.
And that quick of a reach could lead to that bad of an injury.
Had that been the
That is
scenario,
it.
I would have turned my dog over.
Well, I totally understand that, but that's what we all need to think about here. We totally agree that you have property rights and people shouldn't be reaching in and doing those things. People should be able to read a sign, but that doesn't necessarily mean it could happen again.
I understand.
The proximity to a dog that can do that much damage to the public causes an issue.
Okay, I'm willing to empty my 401K and put up that fence.
Ms. Brown, have you had an opportunity to look at this order and what it stipulates?
Yeah, it stipulates that he has to bid.
I don't need you to tell me everything, but we haven't made any decisions, but we're also not a panel that's not unwilling to work with people, so.
We do find them some burdensome, the stipulations.
Right, I
of
understand
this
that. So
order.
what I would like to do with you is go through some of these things. I understand you rent, is that right?
We're renting, we have an agreement to purchase the home within 4
Okay,
years.
you're currently renting though.
Yes.
Yes.
So if we could just go through this order and maybe we can work something out. This is what we're here to establish today.
Okay.
And I'm, like I said, we haven't made any final decisions, but I don't see this going away today. So we and you, we need to come to an agreement that we can all live with.
Okay.
So
We would,
if we can talk about some of these stipulations, maybe we can come to a common ground.
We can, you can uphold an order to put a 6-foot fence up under a potentially dangerous order, can you not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would like to request that we consider that as an option. We would also like to state that we think that the $300,000 insurance policy is excessive. We currently have a $100,000 renter's insurance policy that covers personal liability, and we feel like that's more than satisfactory. As far as the fencing goes, we think that padlocks are dangerous to ourselves if we need to get out of the house. We think that the enclosures that we have are secure, and if we can have other secure enclosures, the padlocks are unnecessary.
I would also like the option to have the kennel, if it turns out that the fence is more expensive than what I have in my 401K to do that we would still be allowed to have one or the other, either the kennel or the fence. If we have to start with the kennel and then eventually we can put the fence up, then we can remove the kennel and the dogs will be allowed to run in the yard. We rescued him from a confined area and we'd like him to be able to run and play in the yard, but with public safety in mind. Of course, we don't want any children getting hurt or anyone getting hurt for that matter, so.
We've already received a letter, I'm sorry, which I didn't pass out, but we have, if you'd like it, from our landlord, that's DocuSign stating that she's okay with having Diesel on property.
With
but
a dangerous order?
Yeah, even with the dangerous order. So we already have that taken care of. We've ordered the signs that say dogs in yard, no trespassing. And we have 3 of them, 1 for the front and 2 for the sides, since it goes back a bit, so that way that the fence is, completely covered with the signage and it's not just one sign.
It's my understanding that the dogs can be quarantined at your residence if you sign an agreement to uphold certain stipulations until things are set in order. our main concern is getting Diesel back home as soon as possible. I know that the facility where he's being quarantined now is by our own recommendation because they have more staff.
So it's a 45-day quarantine at this point?
No, it's
It's
10.
10 days.
Oh, just a 10-day, okay, this is.
So we'd like to get him back as soon as possible and keep him, and agree to
Can't
keep
make
him
that
in
decision.
quarantine situation
Yeah,
at our home.
that's a state health department.
So at 10 days, we're able to get him back even with this order in place?
Well, the
Because
order.
we have to comply with the order before we can get our dog back, right? They're gonna take some time. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot being asked in this order. You know,
Yes.
Constructing the kennel with a concrete floor, you know, it's gonna take some time and some
It
money.
doesn't have to be concrete.
It says in your thing,
It's-
that's what you're requesting.
If you read it, okay,
Anti-digging device must cover the entire floor of the pen and be constructed of concrete foundation or a minimum
or
number
minimum
9.
of a 9 or 11.5 gauge heavy duty, which is the fencing requirement.
Okay, still, it's gonna be financially burdensome, and it's not gonna happen overnight. So we request that once the 10-day quarantine is up, we'd be allowed to sign an agreement to keep him in quarantine conditions within our own home. He will not be out in the yard, you know, when he's not on a leash with his choke
That's
collar.
gonna have to come down from the health officer.
I mean, we have a representative on the commission from the health department, correct? Or no?
No, I'm the representative from the health department, but the quarantine is a state, it's a rabies issue. It's,
I mean, obviously, the 10 day is 10 day for.
has to do with rabies. It had nothing to do with anything else.
compliance
with
with the
rabies. If
agreement.
your dog were to die within the 10-day period, then potentially it could have been rabid. And then
Right.
that would, it would have a whole nother set of circumstances.
I understand that, the purpose for the
So-
10-day quarantine, but at
Right.
the end of the 10-day quarantine, in compliance with this, we're asking that we be able to bring him home
Well-
as part of, talking
But
about the
keep
stipulations of this
in mind, you
agreement.
did sign an agreement that, the conditions of the 403, or 12-4-403 would be in compliance before he could.
I signed that so that they would bring him back to where they initially agreed to allow him to be quarantined, and they told me he couldn't go back there until I signed that. I was here for an hour that day, and was never told that I had to make the payment here before he could be released to Dundalk. I was under the impression the payment had to be made for him to be released from his quarantine. So I was here for an hour, and then I left and got a
I'm
call.
gonna check,
that-
because it has nothing to do with why we're here. We're here for the order,
So
not
what
for
we are
quarantine.
getting to is that it seems like we are most likely upholding the order, but what we need to negotiate is if there's anything that we can be lenient on, and if there's questions that you have, we can go one by one and see if there's anything that we can concede on at all. So
Let's
either
do
it's
that.
upheld in completeness, or we make some adjustments, but I don't think it's gonna be thrown out completely. I think at this point, based on that level of bite wound, that's what I'm trying to say, like, at minimum, I feel I have to have a fence here for the other,
That minimum as opposed to the kennel?
so.
Oh, one or the other, right?
Right, so this is why I
I
feel
agree
like
with you
this
that I
needs
think
to
this dog,
go.
if this dog's been confined in the past, and you think for his mental health, a run is fine, that's fine, but obviously, a fence to take that much
Right.
space up is also
Some
gonna be
sort of
costly.
confinement.
We understand that.
So the order will
but-
be upheld, but we are willing to negotiate, so let's get to the negotiations.
The order, you said it yourself, the order being upheld was the only way you can ensure that we do the fence, but potentially
Right.
dangerous, you can uphold the fence also. So
Well,
we could
right,
get it
so
downgraded
once
to
again,
that.
it's a potentially dangerous order, it's still an order. So that's, when we
Well,
refer
it's
to
fine, I
an
would
order,
prefer
whichever way it
potentially
goes.
dangerous.
We'd
however
like
we
it
look at that.
stated for the record that we're requesting it be downgraded to a potentially dangerous order, given the mitigating factors. But,
And keep in mind, this is also an amended order already.
I have to say something. I mean, I think you were given a gift by animal control in this not being a vicious dog order.
I agree.
I can't see doing anything to modify the dangerous dog. This is a horrible dog.
I'm
And
sorry, it was a horrible dog?
based on the wounds it
It
inflicted
was a
on that
horrible
woman.
incident and a horrible injury,
Okay.
absolutely. Not a horrible
But,
dog.
you know, the trespassing, the fence is so close to the sidewalk, you're never gonna be able to prevent the mailman, the UPS guy, or somebody coming near that fence. When you talk about provoking, that just upsets me to no end. This woman wasn't poking a stick at the dog and trying to poke it in the eye or anything, they were trying to pet it. But you keep labeling that as provoking the dog. I can't see bending any of these requirements
Okay.
at all. I think you've already been given a gift.
as was previously suggested, we'd like to go through it for the record, as was just recommended to us. As we stated, the 6-foot fence or the kennel, we stated that we feel the padlocks are not necessary. We already have a $100,000 insurance policy. He's been microchipped,
He's been
neutered, yes. We have a letter from our landlord already, and we have the no trespassing, animals in the, or dogs in the yard, signs.
We're okay with notifying the neighbors?
Yeah, that's fine.
Not to come near the property. So basically, we'd like to amend the $300,000 insurance policy.
I don't believe that we have the authority to change the dollar amounts, is that correct? I
No,
think
I
we've been
think
through
we've
this
done that
before,
before.
are we allowed to?
Oh, you did.
You can recommend it, it's just it still goes to the chief of police
Okay.
after you, to see if he upholds it or overturns.
Okay.
Well,
And
we also-
keep in-
Depend on what's needed.
But we also determined at the last meeting that that $300,000 is not financially a burden.
Okay.
For a Rottweiler with a dangerous order? That's not a
Mhm.
financial burden?
Yep.
Through whom?
I mean, and keep in mind at number 10 and stuff, basically, I mean, you would have to physically allow him to have the signs that he has now, because we basically advise that, that's why it states it there, that the sign has to say you have a dangerous animal on your premises.
Is there anything else that we would like to add?
We need to have deliberations.
We just wanted to talk about, once again, just, the status of his quarantine in the meantime while we're working on the, kennel and fencing. We know that according to the code, he can be quarantined at home, and we're willing to uphold all the standards to that, you know, not have contact with the other dogs in the house, that's fine. We have separate levels with the crate on a separate level.
And it's a state level, they can't make that decision. It'd have to come
Okay.
down from the health
That's what I was
officer.
wondering, yeah.
Okay,
It's not something that we can make a decision on.
okay. No, that's all.
Are we closing for deliberation?
Do you want to close for
Any more
deliberation?
Let's see.
I'm willing to discuss are we
Sure,
deliberating at this point?
ready to do
Or do
that.
we have more questions for anyone?
I don't have
I
any
don't have any more.
questions.
We'll close to public participation, we're to open deliberation.
I can see here that it doesn't have a lot of the other dangerous order
Yeah.
requirements, like the secondary barriers at the doors, has to be in a key lock room and a crate upstairs when people are in the house. There's a lot of concessions that have been made, which I didn't realize that at first, that
That's
we
fine,
had
but I thought we were
made
gonna
quite
end
a.
up dropping a few of those.
Right, a lot of those things, because it seemed like it'd be a fence barrier thing, but we don't have any of the inside house things, which I think is great. I think that's very helpful, that they don't have to do that. Their request was, the kennel or the fence, not both. Is that,
I think that's standard, though. I think if they have one or
That's
the other,
regular,
that's
right.
fine, yeah.
that we don't have to make a decision on that, because it's already an either or thing. They can have both or whatever. Their other question was about the
Insurance.
$300,000 liability insurance. What are our thoughts? Do we have the abilities to discuss? They have $100,000 at this time. Is that something that we can concede on?
I'm not opposed to conceding on that, since they already have it established.
Yeah, I
And
don't
what,
see
I
an
wasn't
issue
here
with that.
last time about the burden and the discussion
Yeah.
about liability insurance.
300,000 is standard.
I also think.
It's like if you get car insurance, it's standard for 300,000 is the minimum you can have for liability in case you run over somebody in a crosswalk.
Right.
So that's not,
So what
It's
is,
not
Unusual.
above the minimum kind of standards that are.
right, it is
Right.
the standard.
For dogs and stuff, yeah.
right, and that's what we discussed at the last meeting.
Okay.
Well,
Then
I
from-
personally think that taking the long view of this, that if they're gonna put a fence up and keep the animal from being able to make, basically people being able to reach over the fence anymore, essentially is what this fence is doing. I mean, it's not like this dog is making overt efforts to go over the other way.
Right.
But the money saved on an insurance policy could be applied to this construction of the fence, as far as is how I see it.
Trying to
So-
help anywhere that we can.
I mean, considering the fact that it is true, the fact that they're, that it wasn't like this dog jumped out and did this. I mean, it would be a totally different story. I would be 100%,
Right.
let's go with it as it is, but I'd be willing to make, just an exemption for that, for the insurance.
For sure. I'm okay with that.
Number 8, Serena, is the,
That's
is that
standard.
something, is that?
That's standard.
Is that standard? I don't remember seeing that one before. Oh, I guess, okay. Running at large is what threw me off. So I guess if they were to move, transport or move it, that's a pretty standard thing. As far as potentially versus dangerous, I mean, you know, to me, it's, I think that regardless what title you put on it, we're asking for the same thing.
And we're not asking them to have this dog basket muzzled when they're coming out of the house and walks, right? I don't see that in the.
Oh, no,
Is
saw that on there, that was on, should not be taken, number 3, should not be taken out of the home unless restrained
Here
on
we go.
6-foot lead and harness and muzzle.
Number 3, okay.
And I have no problem with that, I mean.
Right.
You know, like I said, with the potential has been shown that he can inflict injury, so why not have him, I mean, it doesn't hurt anybody to have him in a muzzle.
Okay. So far, the only correction that I have is that we can come down in the liability insurance. This is one way that we can help them out. Is that, in summary, everything is upheld as is, except for lowering the insurance?
I mean, I see that, and like I said, the only, you know, the difference, I mean, I see your passion with this, I understand, Larry, with the potential, you know, that I agree that this could have very easily been a vicious order, but honestly, as far as the wording goes either way, I feel like if we were to drop it to a potentially dangerous, nothing else changes other than the title.
That's right.
I mean-
It would be pretty much the same conditions, right, is what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, is I would, you know, whether we vote to drop the insurance or not, I'd say that if we dropped it to potentially dangerous, there's nothing, you know, other than the title, as far as I can see.
Right.
I mean, there's, I mean, it used to be the license fee change, is that still the same?
It's a $25 difference now.
$25, it was like,
For PDO,
it used to be a lot bigger difference, but now it's not even that big of a difference on the license fee, so I mean, it's not even like, that's that big of a deal.
I do want to say a couple things to them, that I do understand your arguments, and I don't, and like Tom said earlier, I don't think anybody thinks that anybody should be reaching over onto your property. However, we have discussed at length the extent of the damage that he did. So we are trying to protect the public, and we're trying to protect you as well. I do not think it's a horrible dog, just so you know, but the incident was pretty bad, very bad. So I just wanted to put that on the record. And, you know, I kind of agree with you that it doesn't change, it really doesn't change.
It really does, if the dog has a dangerous order and bites someone.
You know, it's
Goes to vicious.
really.
If it is potentially dangerous and bites someone, it goes to dangerous.
Well, technically, it can go from potentially dangerous.
Yeah,
Apparently it can go from nothing to
well,
vicious.
warning, it can go from
Yes, that's
nothing to
correct.
vicious.
That's
I mean,
correct.
essentially,
So-
it's all based on the injury and the situation, but.
Again, that $25 that we're saving could be applied to the fence, that would be helpful. I mean, so if you're saying it doesn't change anything, it changes
Well,
it to us.
I mean, I think that, I think that the dangerous order is warranted, and that's the reason why I would lean to sticking to the dangerous. I
I would
understand
agree.
that, but.
I wouldn't want to be sitting here a year from now when something else happened and somebody points out the fact that we reduced this from a dangerous to a potentially dangerous with the photographs that we have.
I think that as long as nothing happens going forward, and that everybody is protected, and you ensure this never happens again, and you will have to be vigilant, then, you know, then the things are, for you, are equal, the dangerous and potentially dangerous. But for us, I mean, for me, I believe that the dangerous is warranted, so.
If we
I would-
have the fence, the 6-foot fence in order, he won't need to be on a leash and muzzled to run around in our yard. If this fence is in place, he'll be able to run out. Okay.
But until that's in order, if you go with the kennel, he will have to have a muzzle and a leash to walk into
To
the
walk to
kennel.
the kennel, absolutely.
Well, I would like to make a motion to uphold the order with an amendment to number 5 and lowering the minimum amount of insurance to $100,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Are you a no or abstain?
The only thing, I would have dropped it to a PDO. That's
So
all.
you're a no?
A no, I guess. Why not? Everything else I agree with.
This is a recommendation to the chief of police. You'll receive his final decision. He'll make his final decision when he gets.